A prison door shuts in the dark, and the sound seems to swallow every prayer that came before it. Inside, two wounded men sit with their feet fastened in the stocks. Their backs carry the marks of public shame. Their names have been pushed behind a locked door. To the city, the matter may have looked finished. The accusation was made. The beating was done. The prisoners were hidden. But Acts 16 remembers something strange happening at midnight. Not a speech, not a protest, not revenge. The scene might have looked something like this. Though Scripture does not give us every detail, stone walls, tired bodies, other prisoners listening in silence, and a fragile hymn rising from a place where peace should have been impossible. Have you ever felt as if your peace was attacked so deeply that your future started to feel buried with it? This story does not ask us to call pain good. The wound was real. The injustice mattered. But for many believers, this prison became a sacred reminder that God can still protect what looks hidden and comfort what looks forgotten. What if the darkness was not the end of their calling? What if something holy was being preserved where no one could see it? The first thing that rises from the prison is not a scream. It is a song. The door is closed. The air is heavy. Somewhere in the dark, two men sit with their feet fastened in the stocks, their backs wounded from public punishment, their bodies forced into stillness. The place was designed to silence them. The city had already judged them. The night had already swallowed their names. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from. And make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Now stay with that sound for a moment. A song in a prison where no song should exist. Acts 16 presents Paul and Silas in Philippi, a Roman colony. After they have been accused, beaten, and placed under guard, Scripture tells us they were praying and singing hymns to God at midnight, and the other prisoners were listening. The scene might have looked something like this. Though Scripture does not give us every physical detail, stone, darkness, breath, vine, silence, and then a voice refusing to die. This is not the kind of peace that comes because life is easy. This is not peace because the body feels safe. This is not peace because everyone understands. This is peace under attack. Peace with bruises. Peace with no explanation yet. Peace before the door opens. And that is why this story still reaches into the modern soul, because many people know what it feels like to have their peace attacked. Not always by prison walls, but by anxiety that will not let them sleep, by a false accusation that changed how people looked at them, by family pressure, by betrayal, by a season of waiting where prayer seemed to hit the ceiling and fall back unheard, by the strange feeling that the very moment they tried to obey God, life became harder instead of easier. And the wound underneath that pain is often not just, why am I suffering? It is deeper. Did God stop protecting me? Did I misunderstand His calling? If my peace has been shaken this badly, does that mean my future is gone? This story does not answer every question about suffering. We should be careful not to turn one biblical scene into a formula for every wound. But for many believers, this prison scene has become a sign that God can preserve peace in places designed to destroy it. The prison was not good. The beating was not good. The injustice was not imaginary. Pain itself was not holy because it hurt. But the darkness was not proof that God had stepped away. That is the mystery. Before the earthquake, there is a song. Before release, there is prayer. Before public dignity is restored, there is a hidden witness rising in the dark. The world may have looked at Paul and Silas and believed their mission had been stopped. The crowd had spoken. The officials had acted. The door had closed. Their feet could not move. But what if the deepest part of their calling had not been chained at all? What if God was already preserving something no prison could hold? And what if the attack against peace was not proof that destiny had died, but the very place where witness was about to be revealed? To understand the song, we have to go back before midnight, back to the marketplace, back to the first accusation, back to the moment when peace began to be publicly wounded. Philippi was not an empty stage for a miracle. It was a living city, shaped by Roman order, public honor, local power, and daily trade. People moved through its streets with business in their hands and status in their minds. Voices mattered there. Reputation mattered there. Public order mattered there. And in Acts 16, Paul and Silas enter this world, not as powerful men, but as witnesses. Their presence disturbs something. The story tells of a slave girl who had brought profit to her owners. When Paul commands the spirit troubling her to leave, the result is not quiet gratitude from everyone around. It is economic anger. Her owners see that their hope of profit is gone. And suddenly the spiritual question becomes public conflict. We should notice what happens here. The first wound does not begin with a prison door. It begins with value being measured wrongly. A human being had been connected to profit. A spiritual act of liberation becomes, in the eyes of some, a financial loss. Coins matter more than a soul. Public convenience matters more than hidden suffering. That is the first layer of exclusion. Imagine the marketplace. Perhaps a hand closes around a coin pouch. Perhaps faces turn. Perhaps the air changes as accusation gathers speed. The scene might have looked something like this. A crowd beginning to form. The sharp pull of hands dragging Paul and Silas forward. The noise of the city tightening around them. Acts presents the owners dragging them before the authorities. The accusation is public. The dignity of Paul and Silas is no longer protected by careful listening. They become men talked about, not men listened to. Their witness is translated into threat, and that is often how peace is first attacked, not always by a dramatic blow, but by being misunderstood in public, by having people decide what you meant before they ask what happened, by being dragged into someone else's story as the problem, by watching truth become smaller than the noise around it. The false explanation begins to take shape. These men are trouble. Their presence is dangerous. Their message threatens the order of the city. Their mission must be stopped. This must be handled carefully. The story is not asking us to hate Rome or to reduce every official into a villain. The historical world was complex. Civic authority, public fear, local economics, and social order could become powerful forces. People under pressure can act harshly. Crowds can move faster than truth. Systems can protect reputation while failing to protect the wounded. That is part of the grief. The first visible attack against peace is not only physical, it is the loss of being heard. Paul and Silas needed justice. They needed careful attention. They needed the truth to be received before punishment was decided. But public pressure often does not move slowly enough to honor the truth. And maybe that is where the story touches the listener. Because some wounds begin when people stop listening. When someone decides your motive without knowing your heart. When a season of obedience is called rebellion. When your attempt to follow God is treated as inconvenience. When your peace is disturbed not because you did wrong, but because someone else could not bear what your freedom exposed. The wound was not only theirs. It is familiar. It is the ache of a person who whispers, "God, you know what really happened." But everyone else is only hearing the accusation. The marketplace becomes a mirror. The coins become a symbol. Something sacred is being measured by the wrong scale. A human soul. A witness. A calling. A moment of deliverance. All of it is swallowed by the language of public complaint. And once that happens, the story moves quickly. The crowd rises, the officials respond, and what began as misunderstanding becomes something far more painful. Dignity is about to be stripped in front of everyone. Acts 16 says the crowd joined in attacking Paul and Silas, and the magistrates ordered them to be beaten with rods. Then they were thrown into prison, and the jailer was commanded to guard them carefully. We should not rush past that. It is tempting to move quickly to the midnight song because the song is beautiful. It is tempting to run toward the earthquake because the earthquake is dramatic. But if we hurry, we may accidentally make the suffering feel smaller than it was. The suffering was real. The wound was not imaginary. The injustice mattered. Pain itself was not good. Before there is a song in the prison, there are bodies marked by public shame. Before there is an open door, there is a moment when the door closes. Before there is a testimony remembered by generations, there is a night when two wounded men are treated as if their voice no longer matters. Their garments are torn. Their backs are struck. Their dignity is attacked in a public place. The punishment does not only hurt the body, it tells a story to everyone watching. It says, these men can be reduced. These men can be silenced. These men can be hidden. That is one of the cruel powers of public humiliation. It tries to make a person smaller in the eyes of others, and then smaller in their own heart. And many listeners understand that kind of wound, maybe not through rods or prison, but through shame, through a betrayal people laughed about, through a mistake that became a label, through a rumor that stayed longer than the truth, through a family wound that no one acknowledged, through a season where your peace was not gently disturbed, but publicly damaged. And when that happens, the spiritual wound can become intimate. God, did you see that? Did you hear what they said? Why did you let the door close? Why did obedience lead here? We do not know every thought that passed through Paul and Silas that night, and we should be careful not to pretend we do. But the scene itself gives us enough weight. Their feet were placed in the stocks. The prison became the image of a mission interrupted. Their movement stopped. Their bodies held. Their future, at least from the outside, appeared buried. The stocks matter. They are more than wood. They are the symbol of a false explanation. The world says their path is over. The prison says their witness is contained. The wounds say their peace has been defeated. But Scripture is already carrying another possibility beneath the surface. Even before the miracle, something has not been taken. They still have breath. They still have prayer. They still have the God who sees in darkness. God's comfort does not always arrive first as a changed circumstance. Sometimes comfort arrives as the strength to remain human when pain tries to make you numb. Sometimes it arrives as one small prayer when no answer has appeared. Sometimes it arrives as the quiet knowledge that what people failed to see was not hidden from heaven. That is not a shallow comfort. It does not erase the wound. It does not tell the sufferer to hurry up and feel better. It simply says the darkness is not the whole story. In the prison, the night deepens. Other prisoners are nearby. The jailer has been given his command. The city may believe the troublemakers have been handled. The visible evidence says the attack against their peace succeeded, and yet the deepest question remains unanswered. What can survive in a person when every outward sign says their calling has been buried? The answer will not come first, as an open door. It will come as a sound. At midnight. Midnight is the hour when hope often feels least reasonable. The day is gone. The body is tired. The mind has had too much time to replay the wound. In that kind of darkness, silence can begin to sound like abandonment. A closed door can begin to feel like a verdict. Pain can start pretending it has the authority to interpret the whole story. But Acts 16 says that about midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the prisoners were listening to them. That detail is the point of no return, not the earthquake yet. The song, because once wounded, men begin to pray in a place designed to silence them. The prison can no longer be understood only as a place of defeat. Something has survived the attack. Something deeper than comfort. Deeper than reputation. Deeper than movement. Deeper even than visible freedom. Is still alive. We should not make this sound easy. Their song was not denial. It was not pretending the beating did not hurt. It was not a performance for people who already felt strong. It was wounded, trust, still breathing, and that is where the healing possibility begins to appear. What looked like abandonment may have contained hidden preservation. What looked like confinement may also have been the place where God was preserving a witness no chain could hold. Protection was hidden before it became visible. The prisoners were listening. That one detail changes the atmosphere. Paul and Silas may have seemed buried from public view, but their witness was not alone. In the dark, ears were open. In the place of punishment, testimony was forming. In the place where their peace was supposed to die, others were hearing what peace sounds like when it has been wounded but not surrendered. Perhaps one prisoner stopped moving. Perhaps another held his breath. Perhaps someone who had heard only groans in that room now heard prayer. These details are cinematic reconstruction, not documented fact. But they help us feel the spiritual weight of what Acts does. Tell us the prisoners listened. For many believers, this became a sign that God can preserve witness in places designed to silence it. But we should be careful not to turn the story into a formula, as if every song immediately causes an earthquake, or every prayer instantly opens a door. Scripture gives us this scene as a witness, not as a machine. The deeper truth is not that suffering becomes good if something dramatic happens afterward. The deeper truth is that God is able to meet his people before the outcome is visible. That matters for the listener who is still waiting, for the person whose door has not opened yet, for the person whose prayer has not brought the change they hoped for the person who wonders whether God only cares after the miracle. This prison says something quieter. God's comfort can enter before release. Mercy can begin moving beneath the silence. The soul can be held before the body is free, and then the prison shakes. Acts presents a sudden earthquake, so strong that the foundations of the prison are shaken. The doors open. The bonds are loosened. The physical world that seemed so final is suddenly unstable. What looked immovable begins to tremble. But the first crisis after the doors open is not escape. It is the jailer. He wakes, sees the prison doors open, and believes the prisoners have fled. In fear, he draws his sword. The man who had guarded the wounded now stands on the edge of his own despair. This moment prevents the story from becoming a simple revenge fantasy. Paul and Silas could have looked at him as part of the system that held them. They could have seen only the uniform, only the command, only the prison. But the peace God preserved in them does not turn into cruelty when the door opens. Paul cries out for him not to harm himself. That cry is the sound of mercy surviving injustice. And now, the story moves toward revelation. The door is open. The jailer is trembling. The prisoners are still there. And the question becomes, what was God preserving in that midnight song? The open door is not the deepest miracle. It is powerful. It is cinematic. It is unforgettable. The prison shaken. The doors opened. The bonds loosened. But if the story ended there, it would only be a story about escape. Acts gives us something deeper. The men who could have run remain. The jailer who expected disaster finds mercy. The wounded do not answer fear with destruction. The prison, which was supposed to silence witness, becomes the place where witness speaks most clearly. That is the hidden truth revealed. The attack against their peace did not destroy their calling. The prison did not bury their mission. The place of confinement became the place where God preserved a testimony strong enough to reach an unexpected household. The center of the revelation is the open door. Not because open doors always mean easy escape, but because this door reveals what the story was really about. The door opens, and instead of chaos, mercy speaks. Instead of revenge, witness remains. Instead of the jailer becoming a disposable enemy, he becomes a frightened human being who hears the word of life. This is morally important. A shallow version of the story would say, Paul and Silas were right, and everyone else was wrong. But sacred history is often deeper than that. The story does not deny injustice. It does not excuse public mistreatment. It does not make the beating acceptable. But it also refuses to reduce every person in the scene to a symbol of evil. The jailer is part of the prison system, but he is also a man in terror. The magistrates acted unjustly, but the final movement is not revenge. The prisoners listened, and perhaps they too became witnesses to a kind of peace they had not expected. God's restoration begins to widen. The jailer asks what he must do to be saved. Acts presents Paul and Silas speaking the message of the Lord to him and to his household. The same night that held wounds also becomes the night mercy enters a home. The same men who were washed in public shame now have their wounds washed. The same place that looked like the end of mission becomes a doorway into new faith. Grace did not erase the suffering. It gave the suffering a different ending. And still, the story is not finished. Morning comes. The officials send word that Paul and Silas may be released. It could have ended quietly. A private exit. A hidden correction. A convenient way for the city to move on without facing what had happened. But Paul refuses quiet dismissal. This is the public confrontation. He says, in effect, that they were beaten publicly without proper treatment, though they were Roman citizens. And now the officials want to send them away secretly. No, let them come themselves. This moment must be handled with reverence. It is not pride. It is not revenge. It is not a hunger to humiliate enemies. It is dignity requiring truth. Public harm should not always be buried under private convenience. That matters deeply. Silence has a cost. Fear has a cost. Civic pressure has a cost. When injustice is hidden too quickly, the wounded are asked to carry not only the pain, but also the burden of pretending it did not happen. Paul's response brings moral truth into the open. The public wound receives public acknowledgement. The men who had been treated as disposable are not allowed to disappear as if their dignity never mattered. The hidden truth is now fully visible. God preserved their peace in the dark. God preserved their witness for the jailer. God preserved their dignity before the city. God preserved the memory of this night through Scripture, so that generations later, wounded people could hear the prison song and remember the darkness was not proof that heaven had forgotten. Restoration in this story is not cheap. It is not the kind of ending that pretends nothing happened. Paul and Silas still carried the marks of the night. Their bodies had been wounded. Their dignity had been publicly attacked. Their peace had been pressed by accusation, punishment, darkness, and confinement. But the wound did not get the final word. What was taken is restored in a morally meaningful way. Their voice returns through prayer and song. Their witness returns through mercy to the jailer. Their dignity returns through public truth. Their story returns through Scripture and Christian memory. Later, Christian memory preserves this scene not as entertainment, not as a spectacle of suffering, but as a witness. God can preserve peace where peace seems impossible. God can guide through silence. God can comfort before explanation. God can restore dignity without revenge. And for the listener, this matters, because maybe your prison has no stone walls. Maybe your stocks are not made of wood. Maybe the thing holding you still is grief, anxiety, debt, betrayal, family rejection, spiritual exhaustion, or the fear that you missed the life God meant for you. Maybe your peace has been attacked so deeply that you began to believe your future was attacked too. This story does not tell you to call the pain good. It does not tell you to rush your grief. It does not promise that every door will open tonight, but it does offer a sacred image of hope. The wound was real, but it was not the whole story. The peace they tried to bury became the witness God carried into the light. What looked silenced was still being held. What looked confined was still being preserved. What looked like the end of calling became a place where mercy spoke. God's protection did not mean Paul and Silas avoided every wound. It meant the wound could not own the meaning. It meant the prison could not erase the witness. It meant public shame could not cancel dignity. It meant the darkness was not allowed to become the final interpreter of their story. That is the healing message this ancient night still carries. Your shaken peace does not mean your value before God has been erased. Your hidden pain is not invisible to heaven. Your waiting is not automatically abandonment. Your wounded place may still be held. God may be nearer than the silence first made it seem. And sometimes, before the door opens, before the public truth comes, before the morning explains anything, God begins by preserving one small thing inside you. A prayer, a breath, a song, a fragile turning of the heart back toward Him. That is not weakness. That may be the place where mercy is already moving. So the final image is not a crowd cheering. It is not enemies crushed. It is not a shallow victory scene. It is morning in Philippi. The prison door stands open. The stocks sit empty. The marks of the night have not vanished, but the silence has changed. Wounded men step forward with dignity. A household stands in the quiet after mercy has entered, and dawn touches the place that was meant to bury peace. Now remembered as the place where God carried a song through the dark. The message of this story is not that suffering is good. It is not that injustice should be accepted quietly, or that wounded people should hurry past their grief. Pain itself is not good. Public shame is not good. Being falsely judged, silenced, or forgotten is not good. But this story gives us a sacred image of hope. God can meet His people in the place where peace has been attacked, and He can preserve what pain tried to destroy. Paul and Silas were not protected from every wound. Their bodies were hurt. Their dignity was publicly challenged. Their night was real. Yet the prison did not receive the final word over their witness. Before the doors opened, prayer was already rising. Before the public truth came, God's comfort was already near. Before restoration became visible, mercy was already moving in the dark. That matters for anyone who feels buried, forgotten, falsely judged, spiritually exhausted, ashamed, or unsure whether God still sees them. Sometimes the first sign of God's protection is not a sudden escape. Sometimes it is the quiet preservation of your heart when everything around you feels unstable. Sometimes it is the strength to pray one more prayer, to keep one small flame of faith alive, to believe that your value before God has not been erased by what people did or failed to do. The wound was real, but it was not the whole story. Grace did not erase the suffering. It gave the suffering a different ending. And in that ending, we see a God who restores dignity without revenge, brings truth without hatred, and carries songs through places that were meant to silence them. If this story helped you feel seen, comforted, or reminded that God can still protect what feels buried, take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who may be walking through a difficult season. And I would love to hear from you in the comments. What is one place in your life where you still need to believe God sees you? and is holding what feels hidden. You do not have to share more than you feel safe sharing. Even one sentence may become a quiet testimony for someone else who feels alone in the dark. If you want more sacred stories from Scripture and Christian history told with reverence, healing, and historical care, make sure to subscribe and stay connected with this channel. In the next video, we will step into another forgotten moment of sacred history, where what looked silent may have been carrying a deeper mercy than anyone first understood.